Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, working with members to find health coverage for every stage of life, helping to make care and coverage more accessible in more ways for more people across the Rochester community. Details online at excellusbcbs.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour is being made in Albany this week as the New York State Legislature has passed a fifth budget extender. The budget is now more than 3 weeks late, but lawmakers' work continues. And Senator Jeremy Cooney is chair of the state's Transportation Committee. He has a number of priorities to discuss as we talk transportation, some of his proposals, some of what he's working on to get done here, and we're going to talk a lot about transportation this hour. We can also hit subjects that the audience would like to talk about, and you know how to do that. As always, the email address for Connections is connections@wxxi.org. You can call us at 844-295-TALK. It's toll free, 844-295-8255. You can join the chat on YouTube. Senator Jeremy Cooney, welcome back to the program, sir.
Great to be back with you, Evan.
I guess you can't tell me when a budget's coming, and it's kind of a trite thing to ask at this point because I know there's a lot of serious work that's still getting sort of haggled out there, but is there a sense of the budget getting close?
Well, there absolutely is a sense of urgency. Remember that we do these budget extenders to make sure that we are paying all of our bills on time, that our staff who is working around the clock is getting paid. In fact, the only people who aren't getting paid are the state legislators, right? And so we want to make sure that we pass a budget that we feel good about. And listen, Rochester, Monroe County has a lot on the table. $300 million assigned for economic development right here where we are in studio in the High Falls area of the city of Rochester. But we have so many other budget priorities, from making sure that our hospitals and our health systems get the resources that they need, making sure that our nursing homes and long-term care facilities finally get the investment that they need, making sure that our public schools get access to their foundation aid, something that we are coming up on their school budget deadline in just a couple of weeks. So we have to make sure that we get that right and that we deliver for the people of Rochester. So we'll keep on doing that work, and I'll keep going back to Albany to make sure Rochester gets its fair share.
So I have a long list of things that you're working on, and we're going to work through them. And our audience is always really engaged because whether we're talking road repair, whether we're talking high-speed rail, whether we're talking autonomous vehicles, whatever the case is, people are really kind of locked in on transportation issues. And the first email I got this morning when we teased this program was from a listener who is pretty conservative, and I don't think votes for a lot of Democrats. And when he saw that there is a proposal that the state may be liable for vehicle damage caused by potholes, he wrote in all caps, "About time. If the state isn't going to use the money they take out of my paycheck to maintain the roads, as I'm told, condescendingly told when I point out that we have the highest taxes in the nation, they damn well better pay up when their failures result in damages to my car." That's from Charles. You've heard from a lot of people on this issue. So what are you proposing and what do you want to do here?
Well, look, potholes is part of our everyday life, and we expect, that we come into the spring and we go into the summer and we have that pothole season, especially right now. This past winter was particularly bad. The number of extreme temperature changes expanded our roadways and contracted on our roadways, causing these potholes and more of them. So I started talking about potholes in the context of liability. The buzzword, if you will, this year is all about affordability. How do we make life more affordable for New Yorkers? We talk about this in the context of auto insurance or healthcare insurance. We talk about the cost of groceries and gasoline. But if you are driving to work or to pick up your kid after school and you are on a state road, you had no idea that there was a pothole there, you hit it hard, you could be out $200, $400, $600 plus in damage unexpected. That's an affordability crisis, and I think the state should pay for it.
So let me read a little bit about this proposal and ask you about some of the specifics here. So currently, if a driver suffers damage to their vehicle due to potholes on a local road, they're allowed to pursue damages with the municipality at any point throughout the year, right?
That's correct. So that's a local road. City of Rochester, Town of Brighton, Town of Greece.
State law currently states that a driver can only pursue similar damages from the state on a state road between May 1st and November 15th. In order to be eligible, the pothole would have needed to be reported to the state ahead of time?
That's correct.
Okay, so, some people may wonder if that that is going to be the loophole that gets the state out of having to cover a lot of damage. No?
Well, that's the importance of that 1-800-POTHOLE toll-free number, is that when you see a pothole, even if you don't hit it, maybe you swerve to avoid it, you're getting on 490 or 590, you see a pothole, call that number and report it. It gives our DOT, our Department of Transportation, the ability to go out and fill it. Look, they're not miracle workers. They're not mind readers. They have to know where there's a problem, and they have to give them a reasonable chance to fill it. And to their credit, they're out there doing that work. So when you see a pothole, please report it. But I think the key here is that if you hit a pothole on a local road, you can claim reimbursement, right? You can say, okay, it cost me $200 at the garage. Here's my receipt. You go through a process, you fill out a form, you get that reimbursement. If you hit that pothole on a state road, so again, think about an expressway or a state-controlled road like Monroe Avenue, which has lots of potholes right now, you can't get reimbursed at all, even if there was that notice during a blackout period. When is that blackout period, Evan? Gee, what a surprise. It's during the winter months. So starting in mid-November until May 1st, so we are in that blackout period right now, anyone who hits a pothole, whether they've given notice or not, cannot get reimbursed by the state of New York. And again, when I hear about our neighbors getting on these state roads, hitting a pothole, having to shell out $400, $500, that just seems wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. They're just using what their taxpayer dollars are supposed to be paying for, which is good, safe roads. So I think the state should follow the leadership that our local governments do and pay them back.
I want to know what people say about this. And when I say people, let's start with the voting public. What's the response from your constituents been?
It's been overwhelming. So I've been trying to do more on social media, and I did a couple videos about this. I went out and looked at a couple potholes in Henrietta and parts of the West Side, and we got so many responses of people taking pictures, showing videos, showing us the bills that they had to pay at the local garage.
You didn't just get like thumbs up.
No.
Like, oh, by the way, here's the pothole that I hit.
Well, right on. Like, they kind of like, let's do it. Let's fight back. I've had friends from high school. I grew up here, Evan, as you know, and I had friends from high school I haven't heard from in years said, we always liked you, but now we really like you. I said, well, let's get the bill passed first. The good news is this week in Albany, while I was gone, we passed this legislation that would get rid of the blackout period and allow reimbursement after proper notice. And we passed it out of the Transportation Committee. So now it goes to the Finance Committee, and then hopefully it will pass there, and then we bring it to the floor for a vote. I remind people, this bill actually passed in 2019, but Governor Cuomo vetoed the bill. Now, Governor Hochul, to her credit, has been a staunch messenger around potholes, mostly because she's from upstate New York. She knows what it's like, and she's traveled across probably more roads in New York State than everyone, probably maybe even Bob Duffy, who has also traveled on every road across New York State. So she knows the impact that this has. So I'm hopeful that if we get this bill to the governor's desk, that she'll sign this into law and we'll make this change.
Okay, your constituents love it. What do your colleagues who are not the governor, and they're not in the Transportation Committee, your colleagues in Albany, what are they telling you?
Well, there's a concern about the price tag, and I get that. And it's hard to calculate what the proper price may be.
Sure.
Here's what I can tell you. If you are outside of the blackout period, the state will reimburse you for damage to your vehicle up to $5,000. Now, not every car has a $5,000 damage due to a pothole. It must be a really big pothole if it's $5,000. But, you've got that kind of factor to consider in terms of total liability to the state. But here's what I actually ultimately believe is most important about it. Yes, we want to help people in their individual circumstance repair their cars, but we also want to change the culture and the understanding of how we regularly maintain our roads. Let's not have potholes form in the first place. We can do that by spending more money on better materials that get placed on our roads, thicker asphalts, right? More regular maintenance, so that when there is a change in climate temperature, that it's not as bad of a pothole, or there are not as many of potholes. We could do that by making those critical investments. We will more likely get the funds needed to make those investments if the state knows that there's a liability if they don't do that work.
Now, If I were your colleague and I was just kind of talking through this with you, I'd say, okay, but you're describing something that's expensive, the state paying for pothole damage, versus something that's expensive, which is investing in the roads and making the roads better. We're paying one way or another.
But isn't that a core function of government, right? People pay their taxes. They want to see something, get something back in return. People are willing to pay taxes if they feel that they're getting value out of it, if their schools are good, if their roads are well maintained. This is a core function of state government. I want to believe that every New Yorker, whether you're upstate or downstate, when they get in their vehicle or when they get on a road, they have a safe experience. I think this is our obligation to the taxpayers of the state of New York.
I take the point that it's really hard to estimate exactly what the price tag would look like, but do you have a rough range of what you think New York would have to spend to do this?
Well, when we announced this legislation, we worked with AAA, and they showed us that there's actually an increase in the number of reported potholes over the past several years. 2 in 10 drivers reported the need for actual car maintenance or servicing after hitting one of these potholes. So I think that the number of potholes, of course, some of it we can't do anything about, which is climate change, but I think they're actually increasing. We've also, by the way, over the last 5-10 years, invested less in our roads in terms of the overall capital plan. So I think while it's hard to put a total, this is going to cost the state X amount of dollars, I think it is well worth the investment.
$100 million, $500 million, $50 million.
Listen, I hope it's $0 million because that means we've done the job right.
But we really don't have a range. Okay. To you, it's a fairness issue.
Yeah,
it's
a fairness
It's something
issue.
that it should be done regardless.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're trying to get to work. You're trying to get to pick up your kid. And all of a sudden you hit a pothole. You were just getting on the on-ramp to 490. Why should you be punished for that?
What do other states do in this, by the way? Do you know?
That's a great question. So we looked into that. Of course, we're looking at mostly
Yeah.
northeastern states,
Similar
states
weather.
that have similar weather conditions. It's kind of all over the place. There hasn't been necessarily a blanket blackout period like New York has had. But again, I think, as drivers are thinking about affordability in a new way with the, increase in gas prices, the increase on insurance prices, this is just another cost that drivers cannot afford. And in communities like Rochester, in communities like Monroe County, we rely on our vehicles to get to our daily functions.
Let me grab a phone call from Eric in Brighton who wants to weigh in on the subject. I think we've touched a nerve on potholes. Hello, Eric. Go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you taking my call. Listen, a couple of things. Number one, I want to applaud you and your efforts. City of Rochester's been doing this for a long time. I had an old Volvo that broke its rear axle because of, or springs because of potholes, and the city reimbursed me for that cost. That was when I first moved to Rochester like 100 years ago. So I really do applaud and bring up the point that it affects people driving older cars worse than people driving newer cars, which gets into issues that I know you care about. The second thing is a technological help that might work if your state IT department could pull it together. Everybody has a cell phone on them, and those cell phones are capable of recording any kind of bumps and movement and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the things they have is a accelerometer and some other fancy stuff inside that helps you when we're, detecting accidents and all that kind of stuff. There is software out there that will allow a phone to report when it thinks it's hit a bump. And in that way, your state people, all of your state employees driving around as they go about in the course of their day, could begin to create an automated map of where the worst roads are and where the most work needs to be done. And that would really help in prioritization. Well, I happen to know, at least, I shouldn't say I happen to know, that's incorrect. When I worked for IT for the city of Rochester, I did work with the state periodically on some things, and your state IT people are understaffed and have a whole lot of work for the number of folks that you have. So I'm not going to think that this is the top priority. But this is something that I think if you think about a technological boost that could help the state be more effective in addressing its roads, I think that would be one.
Eric, thank you. What do you think, Senator?
Yeah, I think Eric is spot on. And in fact, if you spend some time Googling on this type of technologies that Eric was referencing, you'll find that companies like Waze, Google Maps are already having ways where users can input that data. It's not automatic as he described, but there's kind of an aggregation of that data. And certain, not New York, certain governments are actually taking that publicly available information and using it to process service requests, which brings me to another bill that I have, which is I talked about 1-800-POTHOLE. That's a great system that works. And if you do call that number, I've called it myself a couple of times, you will leave a message and it will result in hopefully your pothole being fixed. But why don't we have an online mapping tool to be able to show some transparency and accountability in this process? You know, I know that there's a generational gap with people who feel comfortable actually talking to a human being on a telephone, but like we should make it easier for people when they get to work to go on to a state website, click where there was a pothole, and be able to see if it's been fixed later on. So we have legislation that would create a state-maintained website that may take some of that LiDAR data that Eric was just talking about and input it into the mapping tool. It's 2026, folks. It's time for us to have that. We're beyond a 1-800 number.
Okay. So are you optimistic that any of what you're describing right now is going to pass where it needs to pass this year?
Well, I have it on good authority that the Transportation Committee in the State Senate is certainly very interested in this. And I can say that as the chair of the Transportation Committee. So, look, we're going to pass the bills out of our committee. We're going to make a big push on this, going on shows like this and informing voters and citizens about these opportunities. Please call your local lawmaker, call the governor's office. Let them know this is important to you because this is how laws get passed.
No, people really care. This will not surprise you one bit as the chair of the Transportation Committee. But one thing that surprised me years ago was we did a show on parking, and I'm like, well, this isn't going to be dry. But, there's debates about what do you do with old parking lots or, walkability. Oh, my goodness, people have a lot to say about parking. We could just do parking shows every day, and people are very fired up. Some people think you should be able to drive everywhere and park right in front and walk right in. Some people want no parking lots facing roads. I mean, it's just amazing. So, yes, people are going to get fired up about this. Let me get two other comments on this before we shift to some of your other work here. Robert is asking, he says, what should we have done? About 2 years ago, my wife suffered an $800 bill running over a pothole. There were 2 flat tires and it was disastrous. This was in Henrietta getting onto 590 North. What could we have done to be reimbursed?
Well, assuming, first of all, I'm sorry, Robert, that happened to your family. If this was outside of the blackout period. Again, the blackout period is from November 16th to April 30th, and this is only for state roads, so where Robert just described was a state road. Then you would be able to go online and submit a claim form online, or you could call the local regional Department of Transportation office, or you can call your state lawmaker and they can kind of guide you through the process. There is a form to submit, and again, you have up to $5,000 in reimbursement. Again, if it's not during that blackout period. Unfortunately, most potholes take place during this blackout period. This actually is a good moment to explain the reasoning why the blackout period exists. Not to get too wonky here, but when you see a person out there filling the pothole, usually they're filling it with a type of material, an asphalt, for example. Mm-hmm. They're filling they're kind of plugging the hole, right? In the winter, the manufacturers of what we call hot asphalt actually close down because it's too expensive to maintain those asphalt, processes throughout the entire winter, and then heat the asphalt and have it heated, throughout cold temperatures. Now, there's something called a cold patch, which is a different type of material, but it doesn't work as well. So it doesn't last as long, but that's what local governments, the city of Rochester, the town of Brighton, or what have you, are using when they fill the potholes. You can get that year round. So the state's perspective was, if they don't have the best material to use, the hot asphalt, then we're going to wait until those plants open back up, and that's right around that May 1st time period. They're open now, but that's right around that period. So that's the justification for this period. I still think we have to do better. Let's have the state use cold patch. Let's find a way to make it easier for drivers.
Robert adds that, by the way, a great name for a cannabis dispensary is ROC Pothole.
I'm not even going to touch that.
Pretty good, Robert. And Diane wants to know, got into an accident hitting a pothole at a parking lot at a mall in Greece. Is there anything that she can do?
Well, if it's a private property, then contact the developer or the owner of said mall, and they may have some policies, or at the very least, it helps them fix that so someone else doesn't get hurt or injure their vehicle. But there is nothing from the state government side or local government side if it was on a private property.
And your friends listening from city government in Rochester tell us that the city has an online mapping process for potholes.
See, the city of Rochester is always ahead of the game. And I can say that having worked at City Hall, but they are on their game. The city of Rochester, to their credit, years ago, the Department of Environmental Services, shout out to all of my friends at DES, they actually came up with one of the first in the state trackers where you could see where the snow plows were going. I forgot what it's probably called, like snow tracks or something. But they actually implemented that technology for Rochester before everyone else. So the city of Rochester, Mayor Evans, shout out to you, is doing great work.
All right, some other issues on the Transportation Committee's menu here. You're calling for a 15% increase for public transit like RTS.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So again, let's go back to that affordability conversation. Not everyone can afford to own a car. Or maybe you did own a car, you had a pothole, and you can't afford to fix it. Now what? Well, that's what we have public transit for. Public transit is for everyone. Doesn't matter what your income level is. It should work for all New Yorkers. And, when we think of public transit, people think of buses. Obviously, we think of RTS here in Rochester. But you also should think about subways in New York City. You should think about trains that go from the Hudson Valley. You can think about the Long Island Railroad. I mean, there's so many different parts of public transportation in New York. What I want to make sure is that for Rochester, Greater Rochester, the Finger Lakes region, upstate New York, that we get our proportionate fair share of state dollars to invest in public transportation. When people say, well, I like the idea of public transit, but it just doesn't work for me because the bus doesn't come as much, or it doesn't come out to this location, or it takes too long to get to destination A, B, or C. I say, if we invested the right resources in our public transit system, RTS, we could fix those issues. I always have to remind my colleagues, I go to Albany and, there are a lot of legislators from New York City. And, everyone's got their own gripe about their subway or their bus system. And they'll say, I missed the bus and I missed the subway. I had to wait 9 to 15 minutes. I say, you missed the bus in Rochester in some locations. You got to wait 40 minutes. And by the way, you're outside. And you may have a small child with you. That's not right. Public transportation should be regularly consistent and dependable. And I know RTS and the drivers who operate these buses, they want that, but we don't have enough resources to go to every destination as possible. If we had more money coming to RTS, they would be able to do more frequency. So maybe the bus comes every 10 to 15 minutes along certain commercial corridors. So we are fighting to make sure that we increase the amount of money that comes to upstate transportation systems like RTS. And by the way, an individual living here in Rochester can save upwards of $13,000 per year. That's significant money, right? Because the gas costs are going up, and who knows how long this ridiculous war will go on overseas, which is, of course, is directly impacting crude oil prices and having a trickle down effect to us paying for gasoline here in Rochester. We have seen car insurance go up, and the governor's been a good leader in talking about this. If you can't afford it, you should have a way to get to your destination. And again, for me, this has always been about equity. I represent a community where 50% of the families live below the federal poverty line. They may share a vehicle. They may have access to a vehicle. They may not own a vehicle, but they should not have to go without. They have to get to the grocery store. They have to pick up their kid. They have to get to work. How do they get to their doctor's appointment? Public transit is the answer. It deserves full funding. I'm going to fight for a 15% increase. We put that money in our Senate One House budget. The governor did a little increase. I think we can get to a higher amount.
Okay, and if that increase that you want comes through, you expect RTS to be able to expand some of what they're doing, not just maintain status quo?
Yeah, we've got a great relationship with Miguel and the leadership at RTS. I know he's been on your show a few times. They're very creative. They're very nimble. They're thinking about what are the most popular routes? How can we get more frequency on those routes? Where are we not going that we should be going? How can we better connect large employers in the suburbs to populations in the city? So think about Fairlife, for example. Fairlife is one of our, large new employers out in Webster. Is there a public transit connection between the Fairlife facility and workers who live right here in the city of Rochester? Not yet, but with the more resources, we could try that out.
After we take our only break, we're going to talk about things like autonomous vehicles and some other ideas that Senator Cooney, as chair of the Transportation Committee, has. We're talking to the senator about what he would like to see done this year. And we'll take more of your emails if you want to send them at connections@wxxi.org, or you can communicate with us on various platforms. We'll come right back here.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. Proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, focused on the news, issues, and trends that shape the lives of listeners in the Rochester and Finger Lakes regions. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. I was asking Senator Cooney during a brief break if he has ridden in a Waymo yet. I have not. You have.
I have. It is a surreal experience. But after the first 5 minutes, you're taking out your phone, you're filming the wheel moving without a human driver behind it. It is, it's fun, it's interesting, it's a little scary. You kind of forget that you're in a vehicle and you're just getting to your destination. I know that sounds hard when you haven't been in it, but
that sounds really hard for me.
It is not a roller coaster ride, right? These vehicles are following the jurisdiction that they're in, the rules of the road. They're going at a safe speed. They're comfortable. You're still wearing a seatbelt like you would in a normal vehicle. When you get into a regular taxi with a human driver, right? Maybe you engage with that taxi driver a little bit. Chances are you buckle your seatbelt and you're looking at your phone. Right? Or you're talking to your person that you're in the car with. Right? You forget that you're in the vehicle. You're not watching the road. You're not looking at all the light changes. You're trusting that the driver is doing the right thing. The same thing happens with an autonomous vehicle.
Well, and honestly, I'm sure this is not breaking any news. I suspect that Waymos and autonomous vehicles are going to be better drivers than humans. I mean, humans are not good drivers. We are very distracted. We're very tired. We're very stressed. We get very angry.
Look, since the pandemic, the game has changed when it comes to driver safety. We have seen an increase in distracted driving incidents. Why? Because cars today are big computers, right? So you're looking at monitors and phones, and you're changing between different types of entertainment. Hopefully you're driving safely listening to WXXI. But that's one factor. The second factor, of course, are our cell phones. We know that you're not supposed to be using a cell phone in your car, but how many times have we all driven by someone using a cell phone while they're driving, right? Or looking at their phone at a red light, right? They're distracted. They're not looking at the road. They're not seeing that pedestrian walk in front of them. We also know that people are still driving unsafely and using substances, right? Whether that's alcohol, whether that's some sort of drug. We've seen increased abuse of those substances, and that's impaired drivers. That doesn't happen in a self-driven car. And I know that sounds like a George Jetson, Back to the Future, Orwellian type of scenario. But this, for me, has always been rooted in safety. When we saw over the last year, upwards of 40,000 fatalities in this country due to a car-related injury. We have to do something about it.
So I know this is happening in San Francisco and L.A. And you said Phoenix and cities like Miami and Washington? Are they Washington?
Austin and Atlanta. So, and they're testing in Philadelphia, and they just opened in London.
Okay, so take us through then. Is Waymo allowed to be in Rochester if they want to? And what's the process look like, and what's your role here?
Okay, so first of all, Waymo is just one of these
autonomous
right?
vehicles.
So autonomous vehicles. Amazon has a product.
I know you don't favor any vendors.
No. But I just want to be honest. I think because there are a lot of people who are looking to get into this space. Obviously, Tesla was an early adopter of AV technology. In New York State, since 2017, we have allowed the testing for autonomous vehicles, meaning that you can have one of these vehicles driving around on New York State roadways. But there's a huge key. you still have to have a human being sitting behind the wheel. So they may not be touching the wheel, but they are there in case something happens. Well, you say, well, what's the point of that? Well, the point is they are mapping and testing the road conditions, the weather conditions, the type of behavior. All of their cameras and sensors are operating so that they can get to know what New York State is like. So we've been doing that since 2017, and we're still doing that. However, there is a proposal in this legislation that I carry that would allow that same type of authorization across the state, but without a human driver sitting behind her as a backup. And again, this is what other cities are doing. So I spent some time in Phoenix, I've spent some time in Los Angeles over the past year. I've been in autonomously driven vehicles in both of those communities. This is what they have as well. This is where we are going as a society. And, just like any form of technology, there's always going to be pushback and some fear, right? But New York State cannot put its head in the sand here. What we want to do is create a framework of rules, of responsibilities, of guideposts. I'm particularly interested in making sure that the people, taxi drivers, Uber drivers, that these folks are not just left out to dry. I've been talking to a member of the city council about this here in Rochester who's very concerned about the displacement of workers. So whatever the solution is for New York State, I want to make sure that we are setting the example nationally, perhaps even globally, for how we treat workers in this process and empower them economically to benefit from this transition. But here's one thing that's really important for all your listeners. I don't believe that the future of transportation is an either or, meaning that it's either all autonomous, no human drivers, or we stay completely with traditional drivers behind the wheel. I think it's an ecosystem of both. I think you're always going to have human drivers, and I think you're always going to have probably some sort of mix of autonomously driven vehicles. And I think there's room for both. And there are different economic models there, but again, we can't be an island to ourselves here in New York. And the best example of that is, don't forget, for those of us in Rochester, don't forget, for years, Uber and Lyft and the ride-sharing platforms operated in New York City, but not in upstate New York. Yeah. And we always felt like second-class citizens. I'm not going to let that happen to New York again.
What you describe with autonomous vehicles feels like we're talking about AI in general, which is, are we for it? Are we against it? Can it be regulated? Your colleague in the Assembly, Alex Boris, who's running for Congress, just sat down with the New York Times' Ezra Klein to talk about that. The AI companies are going after him. He used to work for Palantir. Palantir is spending a lot of money to try to get him not elected to Congress. In general, do you believe we can see more regulation of AI? Do you want to see a pause in AI? Do you want to see take all the reins off AI and let it go wild? What do you want to do?
AI, artificial intelligence, is bigger than anyone can put one law in place and to regulate it. Do we need? First of all, Alex Boris is a great colleague, and he's very thoughtful and uniquely positioned to understand these issues as an engineer himself. And shout out, he went to school at Cornell, so he is an upstate guy in his heart, even though he represents the Upper East Side of Manhattan. What he has been arguing, and I tend to agree with him, is that there are reasonable regulations that can be put into place. Where he and I see a little bit differently is that the role of state government, or is that the role of the United States Congress? AI is moving quickly. It is the future of global competitiveness. The United States must remain competitive, not only from an economic standpoint and a technology and profitability standpoint with all these different companies that want to start up and we want them to be here in the United States and create jobs in the United States, but it also is for our national security. This is for the protection of American lives. If we fall behind some of these other nations that are moving very quickly with AI, we are putting ourselves and our economic freedom at risk. So the key message for me is, can we create protections for New Yorkers that do not inhibit the growth of these markets? I believe most of those protections and regulating should take place at the federal level, but in the absence of leadership from the Trump administration, we must step up and protect our kids and protect our families.
So let me just prod a couple points there, and then we'll move to other stuff here.
Sure.
AI right now is not popular. It is not polling well. More Americans say they're scared of what it means for the future than they are excited about it. They're talking about their jobs, and they're also talking about literally an extinction risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because people are conspiracy theorists. It's because the AI companies themselves. It is Dario Amodei with Anthropic.
Mm-hmm.
It's Sam Altman. Sam Altman puts the extinction risk of AI at 2%. So that doesn't sound high. I don't know how many people would ever fly again if I told you there was a 1 in 50 chance the plane you're getting on is going to crash.
Mm-hmm.
Probably almost nobody flies anymore. And Dario Amodei puts the extinction risk at about 20 to 25%. Extinction. Now, again, that sounds nuts to me because this is way over my head. But if the companies themselves are saying it might cause extinction, probably won't, at the very least, it could disrupt 50% of white-collar jobs in 5 years, and we could have a mass change in economic structure, and we might need UBI to prevent, like, rioting. Why can't we just say, no, you're not allowed to do that. We're not going to let you do that, and we are going to try to create an international treaty that says, for the moment, we're not doing that, and if we can get AI aligned, the word alignment's important here. It means it's going to work towards our values and goals. Soon we'll have superintelligence, more intelligent than human beings. It will be designing its own iterations of AI, which we won't understand. So why are we not just saying no? Help me understand that part.
Well, let me push back a little bit on the popularity standpoint.
Yeah.
AI companies and the profitability that they have, the record profitability that they have, is deeply unpopular. I agree with you.
Yeah.
The use of artificial intelligence is deeply popular. How many of us use Google every day? A search function is AI. Autonomous vehicles is AI. ChatGPT is AI, right? This is integrated into our experience as consumers, as business people, as parents, professionals, citizens, right? We're utilizing this technology every day, and we rely on it in much part. The question is, who has the responsibility to make sure that we are not over-relying on it at the harm to others or vulnerable classes? I am deeply concerned about the future of our workforce. And while I don't believe that we can put the cat back in the bag per se, I do believe that we can set up protections and training models to get people employed or upskilled so to be able to be in this sector. If we're going to go this direction, let's go in it with eyes wide open, know what's before us, and create a model that works for us. Now, we are New York, which means that we are uniquely positioned to lead in this space because so much of the tech is coming out of our workforces, our colleges and institutions here. I mean, University of Rochester and RIT are leaders in this space already, have been for years. So we have a unique perspective. But I ultimately believe, getting everyone to agree on an international treaty or heck, even getting our Congress to agree on anything,
it's
right? It's going to be very, very
really
difficult.
Hard. Yeah, really hard. It's hard for me to listen to what the companies themselves are saying and think,
well,
okay.
Those are the worst spokespeople for humanity.
But they're the ones on the inside.
They're the ones who are brilliant minds who are working on these issues, but that doesn't mean that they should be messaging our values because their values are not my values. And my values are probably more aligned with our neighbors here in Rochester because we've seen what happens when we over-rely on one company or another. We know that here in the shadow of Kodak, right?
Fair, yeah, that's certainly fair enough. All right, well, let's get back to some other subjects here. We've got, let me grab a phone call from Robert in Fairport first. Hey, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Hey, we hear a lot about, spending more money on transportation and so on and so forth. I'm not hearing much about efficiency. I'm looking at the Rochester Regional Transportation Authority Strategic Plan Report for 2025 and 2026. The word efficiency is mentioned 3 times. Twice it's mentioned around payroll. Aren't there some metrics that we can use here to measure passengers per mile traveled, passengers per gallon of diesel fuel, and work on that instead of just throwing more money at this stuff?
No, that's a fair point. I would think that if my colleagues from RTS were here, they could talk about the efficiencies that they have found. For me, it is creating a system that has more passengers. When we have more passengers, it means it's reflective that the system is working. What I mean by that is, it's faster to get from lower Manhattan to the Upper West Side via subway than it is via car, via city bike, via taxi. So people are, pay the fine or pay the fare, and take that subway ride because it helps them get to their destination faster. That's not the same for public transit in Rochester, right? It takes the bus longer to get from downtown out to Eastview Mall than it is to get in your car and drive, 22 minutes on 490, right? So the efficiency there is if we can invest the resources so that we have more buses going more regularly on these major ways, I believe more passengers will get on those buses, utilize those buses, and we will have a better public transit system. That's where we can find some of the efficiencies on, for example, I'll give you an example. The RTS in the Reimagine RTS plan a couple of years ago looked at the size of the buses. They had, those giant two buses. I don't know if there's probably a technical term, and RTS is going to yell at me here, but there's, those buses that have that little accordion in the middle and that kind of drive. Why do we have those buses going out to very rural, less populated areas when we could have a smaller bus or an RTS on demand vehicle go to those vehicles? They did that analysis. They found those efficiencies in that process where they said, here's how many people are riding these routes. Let's create a vehicle that makes sense for those routes. So I think we can do that. But again, New York City has this infrastructure already built. They have the subway cars, they have the tunnels drilled, they have the buses purchased, they have the, signaling technology in their roads. We don't have that. So we need to kind of catch up and put that investment in our public transit system, and then we will have a utilization rate like other parts of the country.
All right, from email, this is from Jack. This one's going to take some explanation, I think. Jack says, could lawmaker Cooney ever lobby Governor Hochul to have Assemblymember Jen Lunsford to be the next state administrator of auto insurance? And Jack says, auto insurance rates are an important component of transportation in New York State. Now, Jack, I don't even know if Senator Cooney agrees with Assemblymember Lunsford on this. I'm going to do my best to set the stage real quick, and then senators got the floor. The governor has been talking for several months now about her view that one way to alleviate costs and affordability for New Yorkers is to try to bring down the cost of auto insurance. And in the governor's estimation, one of the reasons that our auto insurance is high vis-a-vis other states is because it is too easy to sue for pain and suffering or for car accidents. Not that nobody should, but that there has to be changes to what happens there. There's frivolous lawsuits, etc. Now, the legal attorney in the legal industry, I should say, is not really a fan of that proposal. The auto insurance industry is. I don't know where the legislature is. I don't know where you are on this. Assemblymember Lunsford, that Jack is referring to, came on this program to say, for a lot of reasons, and she's an attorney who's worked in that field, she thinks the governor has got some things wrong in that. But where are you?
Well, I know that New York is an outlier when it comes to the cost of car insurance, and that's a problem. There is one reason and one reason only why New York is the outlier, and that is the fact that we are a litigious state. Now, if I have a deep respect for my colleague, Assemblymember Lunsford, and I don't want her to become the superintendent of DFS because I want her to stay in the legislature because she's doing such a great job. But, she would argue, and I've heard her eloquently speak on this topic a number of times, that what has been proposed as the solution to solving this problem with the high cost of car insurance won't actually solve the problem. And therefore, we will remain a high cost of insurance state. What I think is a framework that we can it can get very technical very quickly. But the way I look at this issue is if we make New York State, the insurance marketplace, more competitive, more insurance companies, think Geico, Progressive, State Farm, will want to come and do business in New York. When they come to do business in New York, they are all fighting for folks like you and me, Evan. They want us to sign up to be on their insurance plan. When they are fighting and competing for us, they lower their rates. It's more competitive, right? They want to offer a lower premium cost to make sure that Evan moves from Geico to Progressive or what have you. And they collect you, and it's a volume business. The more insurance lives that they represent, the more profitable that they are. So the idea is, what can we do at a state policy level to change the competitiveness of the insurance market in New York to make it more attractive to attract these businesses to come in? The governor has proposed a number of what we call tort reforms, ways to limit liability for non-economic damages. We are a no-fault state, meaning that if you're involved in a car accident, you should be able to recover, especially any sort of medical injuries. We don't want to change that. And Assemblymember Lunsford has more experience than me when in terms of dealing and litigating these non-economic damages to pain and suffering. And these are real. People have incurred great loss. And she represented some of those clients. So I don't want to undermine that. But are we so far different than what other states offer in terms of those benefits? And that's the nexus of the conversation in Albany right now is, what can we reasonably do to change tort liability in New York to make it more attractive to bring these insurance companies into our state? I think doing nothing is not an answer. I really think we have to find something. I'm supporting our governor in looking at reasonable changes to tort liability. Does that mean we do everything that she's asked for? No. Does that mean that we, blow up our whole system and become a not remain a no-fault state? Absolutely not. We have to find that balance between protecting New Yorkers who have been injured in a car accident, giving them their legal right to sue, making sure that they can be made whole, and making this a competitive environment for other states. I will also mention that other states are other insurance companies to come to our state. Other states, blue states, not just red states, are looking at this as well. Maura Healey, the governor of Massachusetts, is looking at this issue as well, because this is something that states can do to make life more affordable for New Yorkers.
Is this one of the issues that's holding up the budget?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the policy issues that is going to be talked about in the context of the budget. It's not the only one. But again, New York is such an important market. As New York decides things, other states will look to New York for leadership. So we want to make sure we get it right.
All right, so we got to go faster, maybe about a minute apiece since we're at the end here. You've talked a little about this before. People want to know if the fringe benefits transportation bill is still on the radar and what's going on with that.
Gas prices continue to rise in this state and in our community. Now is the time to invest in public transportation. We talked about buses earlier, but what about bike shares? What about scooters? What about ride sharing, Uber and Lyft? What if we allowed employers to offer their employees pre-tax benefits? So think of it like a health savings plan or a health savings account. You're able to use your pre-tax dollars out of your payroll to pay up to a certain amount for public transportation. If you are commuting to work by bus, why can't you write off the cost of your bus pass? Or if you use a bike share, utilize that bike share program. This would not be for any car-related expenses, so insurance or fixing that pothole injury. Right?
Separate issue.
Separate issue.
Yeah.
But this is just an additional thing that, by the way, you can already do in New York City. You can't do it in upstate New York. And I say,
Oh, interesting.
why?
Okay. Is it going to pass?
Let's get it done.
Okay, we'll find out here. The Trump administration recently announced they're going to withhold 4% from New York State and federal highway funds.
Which is about $75 million. Ridiculous.
What kind of impact?
Huge. Listen, for a president who is from New York knows that he is hurting his home state when he makes a reckless decision like this. And by the way, who is he going after? Blue states. It's California. It's New York. Gee, I wonder why. This is the worst of politics. When we talked about earlier in the program, the state of our roads. The money that is being taken or withheld from our federal government is preventing us from making these improvements to our roads, the quality, the materials that we use, the regular maintenance. This is what all of us enjoy. And by the way, who's paying the federal tax bill? It's New Yorkers. I always remind people that New York State is considered a donor state, right? Yeah. We pay more in our federal taxes to Washington, D.C. than we get back. And now President Trump is taking more of that away from New Yorkers. It's shameful, and it's bad politics, and we're going to fight it.
All right, last minute here. Highway worker safety protections. What can you do?
So who are the people filling the potholes? Who are the people making our roads safer for all of us? They are out there doing the work. This week is actually Work Zone Safety Awareness Week. I'm going to be out in a work zone actually tomorrow here in Rochester. When you're zipping by these work zones and you're going beyond that 55 miles per hour, you are putting people's lives at risk. Last year in New York, 2 of our workers lost their lives. They did not come home at the end of their shift to their families because people were speeding. People are running into these work sites. They're getting aggressive. They're using abusive behavior. They're stopping, getting out of their car and hitting people with bats. They're throwing hot coffee at these workers. These are our neighbors. They're doing exactly what we asked them to do. You saw how much energy we had when we were talking about potholes, how people were all fired up. They want those potholes filled. Well, the people who are doing that work are being abused. So I've got legislation to hold people who are doing these bad acts accountable, creating a felony for when you assault one of these workers. Or if you fail to move over on 490 or 590 or the thruway, we're going to increase that penalty. We want to make sure these workers go home at the end of the day. It's the right thing to do.
I always want to thank you for the time, Senator. Senator's generous with his time. He's been on this program a number of times talking about these transportation issues. We covered a lot of ground, and now, I guess, is the next few weeks, we're going to find out what happens in the near term. Then we'll talk about what the long-term horizon looks like with Senator Jeremy Cooney from District Number 56, the Transportation Chair. Come back anytime, and I hope it's soon, sir.
Thank you, Evan. Great to be with you.
Senator Jeremy Cooney. And from all of us at Connections, thanks for being with us. We are back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.